Hey, what's up, everybody? It is super great to be here. So today I'm going to talk to you about the many AI primitives that are at your disposal and how they both change content creation as well as content consumption. So the rough agenda for the next 30 minutes is I'll give you a little bit about my background, and then we'll dive into the menu of options at your disposal. Spatial AI, visual AI, and then we'll talk about hybrid workflows that sort of take classical techniques, these emergent techniques, and talk about those implications of creation and consumption. And if we have a little bit of time, I'd be happy to do some Q&A. Otherwise, feel free to catch me after. All right, so the computer graphics bug bit me pretty early. I was 11 when I saw this TV show called Mega Movie Magic. And at that time, I was into Flash 5. The younger ones in the room probably have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. But that's basically like dorky vector cartoony animations on a computer. And I realized I could use the same computer to create visuals that were indistinguishable from reality. Of course, at that age, it meant making really cheesy fan films, kind of like what you see on the right over here. Now, professionally, as it was mentioned, I've spent a decade in tech, predominantly at Google, working on AR, VR, and 3D mapping. So instead of blending reality and imagination, which I would call the sort of theme of my life thus far, it became the quest to blend the physical and the digital worlds. I had a chance to do some really cool stuff, from working on VR camera systems, YouTube VR content, to turning the world into an AR canvas with a geospatial API, and even advancing the next generation of Google Maps with immersive view. And yes, doing those I/O Tech Talks, the Sundar keynote, but perhaps even cooler, moving satellites and planes around in the sky, because the Geo team is just that cool. Now I've come full circle to what I call being a creatorpreneur. I'm lucky to have built a following about 1.5 million subscribers on my channels. And I like to say that I entertain on YouTube and TikTok, and then I educate on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I work with a bunch of cool brands along the way. All right, perhaps more relevant to you, beyond what I call shitposting on the internet, I'm also focused on tech curation for TED Talks conferences. We just wrapped up TED 2025, and I'm switching gears to TED Next, which is really about y'all, the next generation. So if you're doing something cool, please come find me after, because I'm definitely in curation mode. I'm also a scout for the venture capital firm A16Z, and Speedrun is coming up, which is for early stage startups. Even if you don't have an idea, if you have a nascent idea about some of the things we're going to talk about, you can get up to $1 million in investment and join this 12-week accelerator program. So the deadline's coming up May 11th. Feel free to apply at the link over here, take a photo, and absolutely feel free to list me down as a referral, because we love HarvardXR. All right, let's get into it. All right, so AI has entered the chat, right? Throughout my career, I've witnessed the emergence of AI as this sort of transformative force. It amplifies and commodifies many of our abilities, instincts, and impulses in remarkable ways. But while all of this may seem groundbreaking, it often mirrors concepts that have been around for a really long time. In other words, this has never happened before, yet has happened time and time again. And I think spatial representations are a good example. Whether it was 1800s paper prototypes, or Disney's multiplane cameras, or Google's multiplane images, you see the same core idea repeat itself again and again. The evolution of animation follows a similar pattern. It was manual rotoscoping, and now it's AI-powered video-to-video tools, as you see on the right. It's basically this progression towards automation and ease of use. So all these things that kind of required complex workflows in, say, After Effects just a couple of years ago are a few clicks in tools like Pika Labs. These tools are kind of democratizing all these esoteric capabilities that I had to learn growing up. Now you can just hit the ground running and focus on an even bigger vision. So on the left, you see the old way of creating content. It's this sort of classical waterfall workflow where you take a bunch of specialized tools and put them together in this serial fashion. And on the right, you see the new way. So what took me 1 week now takes me 1 day. And so the question is obvious, right? Are we all going to pull a Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, sip on pina coladas, and kick it with all this extra time? I would argue no. We will put more value on the screen. We're going to take on more ambitious projects. So just to give you an example, here's a video I created last year using this workflow that I described that got 37 million views. There was a moment in the zeitgeist where it made sense to make this video, and so I made it. If it would have taken me a week to make it, I wouldn't have made it at all. And so, I'm doing a lot of other things, and this has been really fun for me because I can still scratch that childhood itch I have to create fun, whimsical visual effects and do it on the weekend. But what that means is indies like me can start rivaling the outputs of, dare I say, a studio, but studios will start setting whole new standards altogether. All right, so you might say, Bilawal, that's super cute, TikTok videos, whatever. What about the AI primitives I could integrate into higher end workflows? That's where I want to get into the meat of this presentation, starting with spatial intelligence. So you probably heard about photogrammetry. It's the art and science of measuring stuff in the real world using images and other sensors. It's also defined in the literature as the ability to understand and interpret spatial data, essentially teaching machines to grok the 3D world we live in every single day. Now, photogrammetry isn't new. It's been around since before computers. But what is new is the commodification we talked about. What took data centers and teams of experts in the 2000s became commodity by the 2010s. And similarly, volumetric rendering isn't new either, but all of these techniques collectively have gotten a huge boost with machine learning. Enter neural radiance fields. I mean, it's kind of wild for me to see an AI literally spitballing a ray tracing using 100 photos I provided to create this 3D world that you can step inside. And the progress is nuts, right? Just from the seminal NERF paper from 2020, in the last 5 years, we've seen insane progress. But again, it didn't happen overnight. The multiplane images I talked about were one of the first instantiations of these learned approaches to representing the complexity of reality. So I'm not going to give you a full definition on neural radiance fields. I've got a video on this on my YouTube channel if that's of interest. But really what you should think of them as is 3D representations that change their appearance when you look at them from different directions. And while it's not technically accurate, it may be helpful to think about NERFs as a neural version of light field photography. So all the things that classical photogrammetry has a hard time with, right? Reflections, refractions, translucency, transparency, thin structures, all of that is fair game. And then with the advent of 3D Gaussian splatting, which I'm sure you're hearing a lot about on social media and in academia, instead of an implicit black box representation, where you're modeling the complexity of reality and the weights of this multi-layer perceptron, you get this explicit representation that is super easy to render and even edit. Basically NERFs without the N, the neural rendering bit. And so this is wild, right? Suddenly you can digitize spaces and places that you care about for storytelling purposes, for memory capture purposes, and get insane frame rates. Like on the bottom left here, I'm getting 400 frames per second on the scan I did of my parents' house before they moved out of it. And now it's immortalized for the time to come. Same thing on the right, I've got a capture of my backyard in Austin, Texas, running an Unreal Engine at 100 frames per second. Totally wild. Why would you model something from scratch if it exists in the real world? Just capture it. You can also do really cool view-dependent effects, and this is what I meant by the representation changes based on how you're looking at it. And it's funny, 3D Gaussian splatting uses spherical harmonics, this old physics concept, to basically give you this ability. So all the light transport effects through the leaves are beautifully modeled. Now, there's a bunch of tools out there to create these kind of scans. Here's just a few of them. Feel free to take a photo. But two I want to call out is post shots. If you've got a Windows machine and an NVIDIA GPU, absolutely try it out. It's free. You'll do all your training locally. You're not sending your data up to the cloud, and it's got a friendly GUI. And the same thing with Scaniverse. This is a Niantic company, and basically it also does the training on the phone in your pocket. And yes, you can optionally contribute it to expand their map, as the previous speaker mentioned. Now, it's not just about creating photorealistic renditions of reality. For certain use cases, you want to create a semantically meaningful abstraction of reality. And so in these cases, Polycam has a really cool mode powered by Apple's Room Plan API that does exactly that. It finds these higher order primitives in your scenes and effectively gives you a 3D floor plan. And just imagine that, the phone in your pocket on device can make this right now. There's also some very compelling research in academia, such as spatial LM, that allow you to take any capture and do offline processing to get even more semantically rich results. Let's also talk about manipulating reality. As I mentioned, NeRFs were these implicit black box representation. Since Gaussian splatting gives you this explicit representation, it's far easier to transform. If you've got crazy point cloud shaders that you made in the past, like a lot of folks that do EDM visuals for concerts on screen, do things like this, or playing with a Kinect, you can bring all that stuff to bear with a 3D Gaussian splat capture. There's also really cool editors out there. Two I'll call out are Supersplat and Spline if you want to clean up some of your captures. And there's also really great plugins for After Effects. PostShot has one, and then iRealix has one. So if you're already doing stuff in After Effects, this is a way you could do virtual sets and some really cool transitions. Yeah, of course, it's being used in music videos and commercials. We also just used 3D Gaussian splatting made by the homie Don Allen III for the opening of TED 2025. I'll probably skip over this in the interest of time, but you can capture stuff with a phone in your pocket and the DSLR, but they're very compelling capture systems that are basically taking LiDAR SLAM, so simultaneous localization and mapping. You're figuring out where you are in the space and continually building this refined map of the space to get a LiDAR artifact, but also get 3D Gaussian splats. And the kicker here really is the capture time. Like if I was capturing a monument like this with a DSLR, even with a fisheye lens, I'd be like walking around for 2 or 3 hours. Now you can do it in 15 minutes and get both artifacts for free. So very, very cool stuff. Check out XGrids if you want to look at capture platforms like this. Now, what's also cool here is that if you built a 3D model of the world, you can also query it to do very interesting things. And let me see if I can just pause right. Can we pause right here very quickly? And so we talked about this photorealistic human-readable model of the world. We also talked about creating this abstracted version of reality. There's a third one, the machine-readable model, right? It's cool. We can just go to the next slide. And so enter VPS here. You probably heard about, global positioning system. You obviously use it every single day, as to find your latte or your classrooms. But there's also VPS, visual positioning system. Essentially, you can take a photo and then you use machine learning to extract salient features from it, match it up against this 3D model that's created with all of Street View imagery, and figure out your exact location on the globe with sub-meter positional accuracy and a couple of degrees of rotational accuracy. It's absolutely wild what you can do. And the craziest thing about it, the reason I flashed it to a bunch of students especially, and young professionals, is that it's free and it's available in over 100 countries, basically everywhere that you have Street View. And another interesting primitive to go with it is Google's 3D tiles, which makes all of the Google Earth photogrammetry data available in this open OGC 3D tiles format. This is something I had a chance to work with Cesium and Patrick Cozy to get that data out there in this sort of interoperable format. Now, if you combine visual positioning system and 3D tiles, you could do some amazing things. Like you can annotate a global model of the world, kind of what you see on the left, right? You're on your desktop, essentially. Can we play that video clip again, possibly? Annotate this global model of the world. You could see that place, drop these annotations, and then when you're at the place with your phone today and glasses or headset tomorrow, you could see them precisely anchored where you left them, and vice versa as well. Drop anchors in the real world and then see it in this global view. Of course, what you can also do here is if you're doing these Gaussian splatting captures, you can capture the thing you want in detail and then use Google's 3D tiles for the surrounding context and the set dressing, if you will. A really cool tool that's being used in virtual production and filmmaking right now that I want to bring to your attention is Cyclops. It's basically what I just described, right? You can have a real and virtual camera. You can take a tracked iPad and suddenly start figuring out your shot list, the cue lines for where you're going to place the talent. Where's the sun going to be at that point in day? And basically figure out your shot list. And then when you go there, you can see that digital model precisely overlaid with that amazing accuracy when you're scoping things out in person to set it up for real. So if there's one thing I'd ask you to walk away with is to focus and think about what are the applications for VPS plus 3D tiles, especially if you care about building XR experiences that are anchored in the real world. And not just because I worked on them, but because I think they're terribly, terribly underpriced and people aren't paying enough attention to them. All right, so let's change gears to talk about visual intelligence. I kind of think of visual and spatial intelligence as two halves of the same coin. And I basically distill it down to teaching machines to perceive the world and understand the contents within it. So think of this as what computer vision would define as classical CV tasks of estimating human pose, depth, inferring, physically based rendering shaders, doing semantic segmentation, tasks like that. And so two really cool companies I want to flag here are Wonder Dynamics and Move AI. And it's funny, I had Palmer Luckey come and speak at my session at TED this last week, and he had a really funny line, which is basically, your Snapchat filters have better perception than the most advanced military systems. And that's actually true, because most of this talent have been in large companies, and the canvas that they've been targeting are all these consumer applications. Now we're seeing reverse pollination happening, not just in defense, but also in higher end content creation. So Wonder Dynamics, recently acquired by Autodesk, does stellar monocular pose estimation for all sorts of, I thought I had 30 minutes, are you sure? Oh. Okay, cool, yeah. Because I ain't gonna get through this in 5 minutes, homie. It's a monocular pose estimation. The same thing with Move AI, which essentially gives you the ability to take like a bunch of iPhones or machine vision cameras to do this type of real-time performance capture without getting your talent into a crazy suit or something like that. So this is wild, right? Like suddenly you can start reskinning reality and it takes a fraction of the effort. On the left, you see me reskinning, relighting myself using a tool called Bilawal out of South Korea, a really amazing tool, partnered with NYU. And on the right, I'm basically taking this like the blocked out 3D scan that I did, kit bashed a couple of things together, and then reskinning it with Runway ML. On the segmentation side, it's really interesting too. Meta's obviously released some amazing things. Segment Anything 2 is released under a very permissive Apache 2.0 license. And Track Anything is also available on this very permissive MIT license. And this is wild to me, having grown up on Adobe tools like After Effects, this stuff is order of magnitude better. And it just doesn't seem to stop. Sorry, could we play these videos? It's wild, right? Samurai is the one thing that came out that just introduced the old school Kalman filter with SAM 2 and does very robust tracking. As you can see, the tracking is maintained across the board. And Meta's doing some very cool things by using these capabilities to create synthetic training data, to create video models that can do that type of fine-grained editing where you just swap the background or just swap a certain object and respect the lighting and everything else in the scene. Depth is another key component of this. And so ByteDance released something called Depth Anything, and this is under Apache 2.0 as well. A bunch of people are already building very cool products with it. And this is particularly popular in the sort of stereo 3D community for the Apple Vision Pro, the Quest 3, and soon Project Muhan, basically converting 2D content to 3D very, very simply. So an example of a company that's bringing all of this together is Simulon. I'm an angel investor in this, so full disclosure there. But they're basically taking all of these little pieces like lighting estimation, high quality motion tracking, geometry estimation. So you can skip all those steps of drudgery in visual effects and get to that first render quicker and then start iterating from there. All right, so that brings me to hybrid workflows. Approaches that get you the best of both worlds. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about the term vibe coding. You probably also heard about model context protocol. Essentially, think of it as a way for LLMs to interface with existing tools like Blender. And so those are the examples that you see. And this is very exciting to me because you're tapping into the world knowledge of these large language models, but using the tools that you know and love that give you explicit control. So on the right, what was happening there is you tell this model, hey, tell Claude, hey, this is what I want to create. And it's not only going to build the scene out for you, it's doing tool use and calling a text to 3D AI model called Trippo to basically create those assets for you and then iteratively refine and place them. And so how cool is that? It's starting to feel like you're almost standing over the shoulder of a human and asking them to do stuff. And I think that's very, very powerful. Oop. There we go. So what I'd say here is I want you to start thinking of this not like text to content. I want you to start thinking about this as content to content. Any piece of content comes in, any piece of content comes out. There's so much, there's a lot of focus on the visual creation models, but I think all these like multimodal large language models are equally excited. I am so stoked with Gemini 2.5 Pro. Same thing, OpenAI's O3, all these multimodal models that are capable of reasoning. They've got huge context windows. You can throw in so much cool stuff like For my YouTube videos, I'll often throw in like 4 or 5 different introductory takes and just tell it which one do you think would be the best for retention, which one has the highest energy, and it'll give me a very detailed rundown of exactly that. Just imagine how your workflows could transform if you start thinking of it more flexibly and not just as text prompt in and video comes out. So if you keep thinking content to content, you can also decide what are the bits you're going to make the classical way, right? And what to lean into AI models for. I'm very bullish on mixing classical 3D and with generative AI. And this example by the homie 8BitE is a great example of this, right? You can exert fine-grained control on the stuff that matters, and then use generative AI as sort of this final pass to take it all the way. And in this case, make this rather tubby person look like Kanye West.
Convenient.
Now, I think content to content also hints at the future of content consumption. I'm going to give you a rather dry example. If you haven't had a chance to use Notebook LM and audio overviews already, I highly, highly encourage it. That's how I consume an insane amount of academic research. But imagine personalized weekly podcasts for your employees, right? Like you take all your all hands videos, you take all your emails, all your presentations, and bam, you get this easy to digest summary. And I think this is the shape of where content is going. Personalized, dare I say disposable, and made just in time. And it doesn't matter if it's some enterprise use case or you're building a new kind of podcast that you subscribe to. I think you can reimagine how you deliver content in a personalized fashion. Now, even before we fully automate this, take my friends Rowan Shuang and Varun Maya as examples. I believe they built what I call the fastest breaking news to Instagram Reel pipeline in the tech media game. So where most other channels are busy reposting the same PR approved assets as a text post or a blog, they've already got a video out there on Instagram that's meeting people where they are and giving them content in an easy to digest fashion. And they're not doing anything fancy. They're using HeyGen, 11 Labs, and essentially eliminating themselves as the bottleneck. They're still human editors and producers that are doing all of the, bringing it all together. But given where MCP is going, you can imagine even those processes will be automated and the VLM will be capable of using, Premiere or DaVinci Resolve for you. The best part about all of this is that their audience doesn't even care that it's AI. A lot of creators are worried that, oh my God, what if I put a deepfake version of myself? Where is the authenticity? You're delivering them a news bite, and if it's valuable, they're absolutely going to consume it. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. Similar things happening in the advertising game. This company that Adobe just acquired made this personalized campaign in India where basically every single ad was tailored to these 2,500 local businesses. So when you saw the ad, it referred the local shop where you could go buy Cadbury products by name. Just imagine where advertising is going to go. Speaking of where this is going, I'd mentioned this notion of disposable dynamic content. You can start injecting sort of the context of your user, their needs, their preferences, almost as if somebody made a piece of media, whatever that piece of media is, for them on the platform they're choosing to consume it. It's not going to be static, but it's not just video stuff too, right? We talked about location-based AR, and historically we talk about, if we want to build location-based tour guide experience, how are we going to create this content at scale? Now, you take these visual language models that have insane world knowledge, take something like VPS, use something like the Google Maps API as tool use, and then text to speech, and you can make that tour for their AR glasses or just their frickin' phone with a pair of AirPods, on the fly. That's really, really wild. But don't just take my word for it. If you ask Jensen Huang, and I had the chance to ask him this at GTC last year, he thinks we're 5 to 10 years out from fully generative AI games, and that every pixel in the future is going to be generated and not rendered. Now, obviously, he's got a vested interest in it. Jensen trying to sell a lot of GPUs, but I actually think it's a very, very tame prediction, especially when you look at some of the recent research that's coming out. Sorry, can we play this video? Oh, there we go. Coming out, such as this one coming out of Google. Paper is called Genie 2. You take a photo and then suddenly you get a minute of a playable world. And I think another leading indicator or another sign that this shift is happening is if you take some of the 3D first AI startups that exist, like Luma and Odyssey, they've all switched to video diffusion as the path to interactive worlds. And literally the Odyssey CEO replied to my tweet yesterday saying Jensen is always right. So there you have it. What this also means is the lines between software and content are blurring, right? You can already code things up faster than it would have taken you to make it in Blender or Cinema 4D. Here's an example. I vibe coded this thing in, can we play that again? Vibe coded this thing in Claude. And I literally felt like a creative director or product manager. I was like, write a PRD for this. And then, hey, tech lead, I want you to sequence this out. No, cut these features. And then I ended up with this really cool visualization that you see over here. Oh, let me try that again. There we go. See over here. And then I ran it through Runway to reskin it to make it look like Legos. I didn't even touch Blender. Like, that's mind-blowing to me. So you could just imagine where these capabilities will be in just another year. So what I think that means is that in this future, instead of getting lost in the details and endless variations, you'll start authoring content at this higher level of abstraction. And the best analogy that comes to my mind right now is sort of, HTML and the document object model, or a 3D scene graph if you're a 3D nerd. And it's going to start with the examples that I gave you, last mile customization, all the drudgery that agencies are doing today, tailoring creatives or ads to like different platforms, viewers, and interests. But at some point, you'll be able to create a lot of content on demand. So the way to maybe think about it is we're not just building content anymore. We're building systems and workflows that do the creation for us. And then video or 3D or audio is just the means for final delivery. All right, to wrap things up, now that we've painted a picture for the future, I want to bring this home and leave you with some, key takeaways. So big picture, you gotta play test with all this stuff. There's seemingly a new primitive that drops like every other week. If you're not playing with it, I truly think you're missing out. And the way you should think about doing this is having two modes. I call it sandbox mode and architect mode. In sandbox mode, you're sort of like building castles by the beach. You're totally cool with the waves of water coming in, washing everything away, but you're gonna pull out interesting insights. Happy accidents will happen. And then you take those insights and you'll start applying them in a more structured fashion towards a deliverable for architect mode. The third thing I'd say is build an island of influence. A lot, especially like students and early founders come to me and say things like, oh, building in public is cringe. And I say, I don't think it's cringe. I think it's a damn near necessity, right? Like, as these barriers to creation keep shattering, I think it's going to get increasingly difficult to cut through the noise. So I think it's important you start building your island of influence now. And then finally, this is a little bit contrarian. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to learn Blender or Premiere or whatever, After Effects, the incumbent tool of choice in your industry, Unreal Engine. You do have to learn these things because A, maybe these things are just running headless in the cloud and AI is using them, so you need to know how they work. And B, for now, they're going to be the baling wire and duct tape you need to ship stuff. So look, I get it. This all feels very exhausting. We do get a new Lego primitive every couple of weeks. But even the existing primitives have not been put together in the most obvious combinations. And I gave you just a few examples, let alone all the non-obvious insights that you're going to get as you apply these primitives to your own business and creative problems. So in my opinion, this is the moment to act, because in this new world, the only limit is your imagination. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah. So we will have time for 2 questions. So anyone have a question?
Anyone has questions? Okay.
Hey there.
Hey.
Thanks for that awesome talk. I'm Tavius Katavi, really big on 3DGS,
cool.
Nurse, web, and something I'm a little bit concerned about as we progress towards these pipelines that just churn out content and influence people to consume. How do we keep the soul alive in that? And how do we thread that line between just making stuff because we can and making things that we care about for people that we care about?
I totally agree. And it kind of brings up this AI slop point that people bring up, where there's just like this endless churn of disposable content coming out. I think it comes down to the kind of island and community that you cultivate. But a lot of this responsibility is going to fall on the distribution platforms and the algorithmic incentives that are set up, right? I'm seeing this happening with creators already. We're like, oh, so-and-so is doing like 3 videos a week because they've got like, they're doing this AI-assisted workflow. I got to do 5 videos a week, and then it's going to be 10, 20, 30, and that's going to go nuts. But luckily, I think consumers are also very loud. On YouTube, you're seeing this trend away from sort of hyper retention edited videos to longer form, relaxed videos that feel like a human's actually communicating with you versus trying to, I don't know, hack your neurobiology to get you to keep watching this thing. The last piece I'll say is like a freaking newsletter. You know, in terms of the island of influence, an email list is perhaps the only thing that you can truly control because, let's be honest, everything else is a rented audience.
I think one last question.
Hi, my name is Amber. I'm a student who's concentrating in interactive media. I'm from Emerson College. So I find that right now our college and other college are like concentrating on using like AI generated model for putting in a real engine or Unity instead of learn rendering. But I found that on our class, I found that like everyone's model are pretty the same by using AI. Do you think it's a good way to like trying AI to generate model, or would that lose our own identity or our own aesthetic value for just using AI to generate it? Because I feel like if you write a prompt, it's like everyone's would be pretty much the same.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. And if you want to see homogeneity, just go look at comments on LinkedIn. They all literally sound the same. Yeah. It's kind of fun. But I think like it's the level of abstraction that you do your creation, right? If you're just going to go into Midjourney or some text to 3D model and you're putting in the most basic tokens possible, there's a vast amount of latent space that we have to explore, right? And so I think there's interesting ways of conjuring out very interesting mashups that could be uniquely you. And I think that's going to be the sign of an artist that can keep using these AI tools. But when people see that creation, they associate it with you. So as long as you create a higher level of abstraction and go beyond just the text prompt, I absolutely think you can create unique pieces of art. Cool. Thank you very much. Happy to chat after.